Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Dr. Dilip from Bali Rameshwar IAS Academy, and as usual we are going to discuss the Hindu newspaper, that is the daily Hindu analysis of today's newspaper dated 27/7/2020. A little bit about our institution. Our institution, Bali Rameshwar IAS Academy, is situated in JNTU, Hyderabad. We offer both online and offline coaching. Offline coaching is presently affected with the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, but you can avail the online coaching, that is at a cost of 15,000 rupees for UPSC prelims, and also at a cost of 15,000 for APPSC Group 2, and at a cost of 15,000 for TSPSC Group 2. And moving forward, so the first article is about 200 proposals from China wait for security clearance by Ministry of Home Affairs. So what is this proposals, and especially why there is a need of security clearance by Ministry of Home Affairs? So as you know that from the recent days, because of the high tensions that are present between India and China, there is a lot of escalation going on, and this escalation had led to certain changes in the policy that is present in Indian sectors. And especially talking about the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, which has left a lot of businesses in the lurch of financial crisis, and subsequently they are waiting for some financial help, that is certain investments into those firms. And when China is almost recovered from the COVID-19 pandemic, now presently it is facing a second wave of the pandemic, but yet it is financially strong, and it is interested so that to take this period of financial weaknesses in many countries and invest in those countries by having a strong grip on the financial aspects of those firms in those countries. So here, to restrict the activity of China, especially the Ministry of Home Affairs has tweaked certain guidelines, that is especially speaking the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. So this DPIIT especially, it has tweaked the guidelines so that now if the countries which are sharing land boundary with India seek to invest in certain sectors in the form of FDI, that is foreign direct investments, they need to first seek the permission of Ministry of Home Affairs. That is, they have to go through the government route, not the previous direct automatic route. So for you to understand this, you have to understand what is meant by FDI, that is foreign direct investments. So the foreign direct investment definition, or it has been described by Aravind Mayaram Committee. So this Aravind Mayaram Committee, it has stated that any investment by a foreign individual into a listed firm. So what is meant by listed firm? So listed firm is something that has been present, or its shares or its name has been listed in the stock exchange. So trade of shares do happen in the stock exchange, and opposite of it is the unlisted companies, that is which are not listed on the stock market. So if at all a foreign individual invests in the listed companies and that investment is more than or equal to 10%, so that is greater than or equal to 10% of stocks if he purchases or invests, then that will be treated as foreign direct investments. If the investment is less than 10%, then that investment is going to be treated as foreign institutional investment or foreign portfolio investor or qualified investor. So these are the things about FDI. Then talking about unlisted, so we have seen about the listed company. Then what about unlisted? If it is an unlisted company, any investment made by foreign individual into that company will be treated as FDI. So there is no regulation that it could be either 10% or less than 10% or more than 10%. Then so whatever FDI is there, so this FDI is again regulated by two aspects. Two types of routes are present if at all any individual want to invest in the country. So that FDIs are again by two routes. One is the government route or the automatic route. In government route, it has to seek permission before investing into that firm by the from the government, that is government route, because it is regulated, and most of the sectors, especially which are deemed to be critical sectors as of such, the defense, media, telecommunication, satellites, private security agencies, civil aviation and mining, especially related to Pakistan and Bangladesh, have to go through the government route itself. But if you see, after the BJP government coming into power, it has removed something that is called as FIPB. that is Foreign Investment Promotion Board. So this FIPB was totally taken out and many sectors were turned from government approval route to automatic route. But now seeing that China is vying to invest in Indian firms, seeing that opportunity that they are in a financial crunch and they are waiting for investments, China want to take over and have the benefit. So to prevent this unjustified takeover by the Chinese firms of the Indian firms, the Indian government has turned and brought a new clause that any country that is sharing land boundary within India, if at all it wants to invest into the country, it has to seek prior permission from the Ministry of Home Affairs. That is, which were previously present under the automatic route now have been brought under the government route. That is, if previously if you talk about the automatic route, so they have to invest first, then they have to send the investment, whatever they have done, the details to RBI, then it will be given okayed. That is automatic route. So you can invest without seeking government prior permission. But coming to the government route, before investing into the firm itself, the individual who is interested, that is FDI individual, should seek the permission of the government. And if government approves, then he can start investing into the country. So this is all about the first article. And right now, you can see, as per FDI policy, all proposals from foreign investors in non-critical sectors were cleared through automatic route, and those in sensitive sectors were sent to MHA for security clearance. This was in the past. Now, following changes in the FDI policy in April, all proposals from China and Chinese origin investors, even in non-critical sectors, are required to get prior approval and security clearance from Ministry of Home Affairs. Then moving on to the next article. So Congress set to table motion against the Biren. So who is this Biren? He is the Chief Minister of the Manipur government. So Manipur government is headed by the Chief Minister Biren, and he belongs to a coalition government that is supported by the BJP, and Congress, which is in opposition, is planning to push forward a motion that is called as no confidence motion. So what is this no confidence motion? So this indicates what is a motion to begin with. A motion is a proposal that is set before the Legislative Assembly or the Lok Sabha in the Parliament. And in this we have different types of motions, and here what we are concerned is about the no confidence motion. So what is this no confidence motion? If at all you talk about the government, any government in the state, if it has to maintain the government, it has to enjoy majority in the respective Legislative Assembly. So if at all there is a doubt that the government is not enjoying the majority, or there is a doubt on the Council of Ministers that they can carry forward with the government, then the opposition or any individual can start forward, especially who is a member of the Legislative Assembly, can put forward a motion which is called no confidence motion. That is, they have lost the confidence on the government that it is enjoying the majority. Then it is called upon the speaker, who is going to take the decision whether this no confidence motion has to be pushed forward or not. And if at all the government loses the no confidence motion in the vote, then the government, it clearly indicates that it does not enjoy majority, and it will lead to the dissolution of the Legislative Assembly, and once again a newer government will be allowed to take formation. And if at all the government wins the no confidence motion vote, it indicates that the government is enjoying the majority and it will continue to carry forward with the government activities. So now, because there is a problem or discord between the members, the opposition party is trying to move forward with the no confidence motion. Then moving forward with the next article, imported vaccines may be fast tracked. So what is this imported vaccines, and why there is a necessity that they have to be fast tracked? And companies should get leeway in Indian specific tests and trials, says Department of Biotechnology guidance document. So as you know that the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19 is claiming a lot of lives and is affecting a lot of people. So we need to try to put a hurdle or a stop to this never-ending spread of the pandemic. So, and that can be done only with an effective vaccine. And there are many companies, that is especially the pharmaceutical companies, which are in the race in developing the vaccines. And one of important such company is the Oxford University-led vaccine, along with AstraZeneca, which is a company that is collaborating in the development of the vaccine for COVID-19. So in India also, the Serum Institute of India, in collaboration with several other companies, the Bharat Biotech and all this, is also developing different vaccines. And if you see the stages of vaccine development, stages of vaccine development. So if you see the stages of vaccine development, the first phase is exploratory phase. Exploratory phase. In this phase, exploration regarding the vaccine candidate, means what component of the virus or any bacteria for which you are developing the vaccine can be used as a substance in the vaccine. So that is the exploratory phase. So once that vaccine candidate is confirmed, then the next stage is preclinical trials. So preclinical trials. So what happens in this preclinical trials? Once you have selected the candidate, you are going to try to test this on animal models, that is mice and other organisms which are having genetic similarity with the humans. So once this preclinical trials are done, then they are going to move to the next phase, that is the clinical trial phase. So this clinical trial phase is again classified into phase 1, 2, 3 and 4. So there are 4 phases in this clinical trials. So clinical means here trials on human beings is going to be carried on. In the first phase, a limited population will be tested upon by the vaccine. Then if that is success in the phase 1, then in the second phase it will be tested on individuals who are having symptoms or who are being affected by the disease of COVID-19. Then if that is also success, then this will be tested on large population of humans, that is in several thousands, to see the effects of the vaccine. And if that is also good, they are going to move to the next step. And once they move to the next step, that is reviewing and approval. So once they go into this, they are not going to stop the clinical trials, and whatever trial is going to carry on then in the later stages will be documented under clinical trials phase 4. And once here reviewing and approval, so once they have check the data of the clinical trials, documentation, everything. If everything is good, there are no significant side effects, no problem, then they will go for reviewing and approval. Once approval is done for the vaccine in question, then the next stage is manufacturing. So in this manufacturing, that is commercial scale production of the vaccine is done, and after that there is something that is called as quality control. So during manufacturing of the vaccine, the quality control is also needed. Then after this step, the vaccine is going to hit the markets, and subsequently people can start utilizing the vaccines. But all in this process of these steps, the clinical trial phase 4 is going to go on. But if you see the various vaccines which are being developed by many countries, there are in different stages of clinical trials, that is few are in phase 1 and phase 2, few are in phase 3. So if you see the competition, there is a lot of competition, but every one or every pharmaceutical company want to create a vaccine or discover the vaccine or invent the vaccine as fast as possible. So for this, in India, we are relatively behind the lot of trials of different vaccines. So here, in order to fast track that everyone wants the vaccine, what can be done as per the Department of Biotechnology? We are going to import the vaccines, that is, which are present in different stages of testing, and we are going to fast track their development so that they can be effectively used on individuals in order to curb the never-ending spread of the pandemic of COVID-19. So that is all about this topic. Then we are going to move forward. So here you can see the Pune-based Serum Institute of India, which has a partnership with AstraZeneca of manufacturing a potential vaccine being developed at Oxford University, has announced plans to conduct phase 2 and 3 clinical trials, meaning that it will test potential vaccine in Indians to determine the vaccine capable of stimulating an immune response. So the effectiveness of the vaccine also is going to vary from one race to another. So to see that if that vaccine that is being developed or in question is going to be effective in Indians, the Serum Institute of India is also going to work forward. And if at all you see the other thing also, that is the Hyderabad-based Bharat Biotech has also begun testing its product Covaxin based on a SARS-CoV-2 strain sourced from ICMR Institute of Virology, that is in Pune. So this is all about this topic. Then moving to the next topic, So PM Modi to inaugurate 3 COVID-19 testing facilities. So as the burden or the number of people who are affected with COVID-19 are increasing, so you need to have an effective screening methodology in order to identify the people who are affected with COVID-19 and to see the people who are not affected with COVID-19 so that effective isolation and quarantine can be done. So for that process, you need large number of tests. So large number of tests should be conducted. So for large number of tests to be conducted, you need to have the lab which has the facility to deal with this large number of tests that are done in a single day. So these 3 institutes which are inaugurated by the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, will be set up at ICMR, National Institute of Cancer Prevention and Research, which is situated in Noida. That is one. And the second one is ICMR, National Institute for Research in Reproductive Health, which is situated in Mumbai. This is the second one. And the third one is the ICMR, National Institute of Cholera and Enteric Diseases, which is situated in Kolkata. So all these 3 will be capable of carrying out almost 10,000 samples in a day. So 10,000 into 3, that is 30,000. So in a day, roughly 30,000 tests can be conducted by these laboratories. And another aspect is how are they going to achieve that? So they are going to use something that is called as pooled testing. Okay, so pooled testing. So what is meant by pooled testing? So as per the ICMR guidelines, a maximum number of 5 samples can be pooled. So 5 samples can be pooled in a buffer solution and they can be done combinedly an RT-PCR test. So that is reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction test. So once 5 samples are pulled up, they are put in a buffer solution and the reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction is done. If at all the total test turns out to be negative, if the test is negative, then it indicates all the 5 samples are negative. That means the 5 individuals who have been tested by a single test of RT-PCR are negative. And if at all they turn out to be positive, what happens? The RT-PCR turns out to be positive. Then it means all the 5 can be positive or any one of the 5 can be positive. So again, these 5 individuals, if at all, they will be again retested to identify the person or persons who are positive in that given sample pool. So by this, what is happening? The burden on the testing, that is the laboratories, will be severely reduced and they can carry out more number of tests in a single day. That is about this topic and how that can be achieved. So assume that if there are totally 100 individuals or 200 individuals who have to be tested. So normally if 200 people have to be tested, you need 200 RT-PCRs to be done. So 200 RT-PCRs should be done. But by using the pool sampling, what is happening is this 200 will be made into, so how much? 40 samples, and this 40 samples will be tested. So total of 40 tests will be done. And if at all these turn out to be negative, instead of performing 200, only 40 have been done. That is 160 tests have been saved. But if at all in this few people turn positive, assume that out of the 40 tests that are done, so you keep 40 tests that are consumed, then in this, assume that some pooled samples are positive, that is at least 10 pooled samples are positive. Then you see 10 samples are positive, so 10 into 5. So again 50 tests are done for those individuals, 50 individuals. That indicates 40 plus 50, total with 90 tests only we can identify if they are positive or negative. But coming to the normal RT-PCR, 200. So here how much you are telling? Saving 110 tests are saved. So they are effectively decreasing the burden on the laboratories. That is all about this topic. Then moving forward, itolizumab may go off the regimen. So what is this itolizumab? So itolizumab is a drug that is used in the treatment of psoriasis. So psoriasis is a skin condition where the individual's skin is affected because of a certain triggering factor. And that triggering factor could be the individual's own it will trigger the individual's own immune system, thereby which the skin cells will start multiplying and there will be scaly appearance of the individual. That is called psoriasis. And here in the treatment of psoriasis, a drug has been used that is called itolizumab. And now this itolizumab has been cleared by the Drug Controller General of India for utilization in certain critical cases of treatment of COVID-19. But now it has been observed that there is no significant benefit with this, that is itolizumab, in treatment. So they may pull this off from the shelves of the market. And here, especially for you to understand, this itolizumab is nothing but made up of the monoclonal antibodies. So what are these monoclonal antibodies? You know what are antibodies? We have already discussed in multiple topics in my earlier lectures. So here you can see this antibody is a protective substance that is produced by B lymphocytes in case if the body is affected or infected by an antigen. So here a certain type of specific antibodies are produced in large numbers so that they can help in saving the individual from the virus or bacteria in question. So for that, what they are going to do, they are going to actually take the B lymphocytes, which are the precursors or which will produce the antibodies, and that too which is going to produce the specific antibody in interest, and this B lymphocyte will be isolated and it will be fused with a cancer producing cell, which is a cancer cell and this cancer cell, because it is fusing with B lymphocyte, it will continue to flourish or divide, thereby which later the cell which is actually producing the antibodies will be isolated. And because one cell keeps on dividing, it will produce two cells and this cell will produce another two cells. So like this, over a period of time, if you allow this cell to divide multiple times, it is going to produce the same type of cells. So example, your skin cell is going to produce the same type of cell, or else if you will be having other types of cells in the body. So that is not going to happen, and that process of producing the same types of cells is called as cloning. And here, because all these are identical to the parent, those are called as monoclonal antibodies. So that is about this topic. Now they have, though they have approved this, now critics have earlier pointed out that the drug evidence for preventing deaths in COVID-19 patient rests on an inadequately performed trial. So now they don't want to continue this usage. Then moving on to the next topic, Ramesh's criticism of EIA notification unfounded, that's said by Prakash Javadekar. So what is EIA and who is this Ramesh? He is one of the members, a previous government cabinet minister who used to head the Ministry of Environment, and present Minister of Environment is Prakash Javadekar. And this EIA stands for Environment Impact Assessment. So what is this environment impact assessment about? So this is nothing but the government's way to assess the impact on environment by any projects, that is large industrial projects or any other projects that is going to come up in a certain area. So for this, the government has recently given a notification of 2020 so that there is certain changes in the guidelines in environment impact assessment, and it is said that the government has diluted certain important aspects related to EIA assessment of 2020, which especially significantly reduce the public opinion or public involvement in say or decision making, and it gives more power to the government that they can unanimously or by themselves take the decision, thereby which effectively diluting the EIA which was existent. And here whatever the earlier governments or the cabinet, earlier former cabinet minister of the Congress government, that is UPA 2, Ramesh, is said to be found no ground related to the effect. That is the statement made by Prakash Javadekar. So Mr. Ramesh, in a letter to Mr. Javadekar on Saturday, laid out a 5-point criticism of the controversial notification, and the notification promoted land grab, reduced public participation in all aspects of the environmental clearance process, allowed post-approval of projects and violated norms, and went against the principle of cooperative federalism. So this is the statement made by Mr. Ramesh. But even though Mr. Jairam Ramesh has made the statement, the government is totally not taking that into consideration. It is telling that these statements are unfounded. But in reality, definitely it appears that the government has significantly diluted. So the last date for receiving any of the public opinion on this draft guidelines, which have been previously set to August 10th, have been again preponed by July 30th. So now there's a lot of tension among the people who are raising voices that environment, and with this ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, people have realized the essentiality of safeguarding the nature. And now with a threat to nature itself, we have to wait and see how the government is going to move forward. Then moving to the next article, staff prepare to leave US consulate in Chengdu. So this is a step that has been taken by China government against the step that has already been taken by the US government. So in the past days, with the increasing tensions between US and China, what happened is in the US, a Chinese consulate which was present in Houston in Texas has been asked to be closed down, and that consulate is a Chinese consulate asked to close down by the US government, citing that they were harboring certain spies and that is going to be detrimental further to the relations between US and China. So as retaliation to their closure of consulate in Texas, Houston by US, what Chinese government has done is it has ordered for the closure of US consulate which is situated in Chengdu province. So what is this consulate and how is it different from embassy? As you might have already known, embassy is relatively larger and it is usually situated in the capital of the country. But whereas a consulate, which is a smaller one, is situated in any other important city of the country where large activities related to the relations, bilateral ties and everything will be dealt with an ambassador who is situated in the embassy, whereas in consulate, a person who is not as much of the position of an ambassador will be positioned and he is going to take the care or responsibility in increasing the ties between the countries. So as you can see, the tension is increasing day by day. The retaliative activities are going on between India and China. So here you can see the consulate versus embassy. So embassy is larger, consulate smaller, any city here in the capital, and this is the main difference. Then moving on to the next article, Afghan forces are re-arresting freed prisoners, says Taliban. So government denies claims, says militants are trying to sabotage talks. So why there is a necessity of having talks between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan? Where and when did all this problem start? So this problem started after the attack of Osama bin Laden, that is Al-Qaeda, on the Twin Towers of USA in the year 2001. So after this attack in the year of 2001, US declared war on Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, which was ruled by Talibans back then. So Talibans ruled Afghanistan. So they were utterly defeated and they were forced to move back into different regions. And subsequently, US has instated a new government so that it can govern this area in order to prevent power vacuum in that region. But seeing that the Taliban play a significant role and they are continuously invading and continuously trying to create a lot of problems in the day-to-day administration. So in order to set out things properly and seeing that starting from 2001, US has deployed its soldiers all the way till 2020 in Afghanistan. US want to significantly reduce its presence in Afghanistan. So to do that, it wants a stable political situation in Afghanistan. So for that, US has called for talks between the Taliban and the present government. And it is said that as a measure of goodwill, the Afghan government was asked to release almost 5,000 prisoners of this Taliban. So Afghan government is supposed to release 5,000 of insurgent prisoners while the Taliban free 1,000 government inmates. So this was the actual thing, but people are against in releasing this Taliban individuals, citing that these people are very violent and they have involved in a lot of evil activities against the population of or civilians of Afghanistan, and they say that they have no trust that the Taliban are going to bind to the ties after the talks are done, that is bind to whatever things they have signed in the talks. So moving on to the next thing. So Russian Navy will soon get hypersonic nuclear weapons, says Putin. So here Navy will get 40 new vessels this year, says the president of Russia, that is Mr. Vladimir Putin. So here you can see, so the Russian Navy is going to be armed with hypersonic nuclear strike weapons and underwater nuclear drones. So what is meant by hypersonic? So for you to understand, here you have to understand what that is called as Mach number. So what is meant by Mach number? Mach number is equal to the speed of an object divided by the speed of sound. So if the speed of an object is equal to the speed of sound, then the Mach number will be 1. So here, what is this hypersonic? For you to understand whether it is subsonic, transonic, supersonic or hypersonic, it is usually measured in Machs or Mach number. So if the speed of an object is less than 1 Mach, it is called as subsonic. If it is equal to 1 Mach, it is called transonic. And if it is greater than 1 Mach, it is called supersonic. If it is greater than 5 Machs, it is called hypersonic. So now you can see that what is the speed of the weapon that is going to be inducted into the Russian Navy, which is going to travel with a speed which is far more than 5 Machs, and also it is nuclear capable, that is it indicates that it can carry a nuclear warhead. And apart from that, even underwater nuclear drones can be used, and which the defense ministry said were into the final phase of testing, and weapons some of which are yet to be deployed. And the name of that underwater nuclear drone is Poseidon, which is going to be carried by submarines. And the missile, hypersonic missile, is named as Zircon, which can be deployed on surface ships. And they are going to induct more number of vessels or weapons which are nuclear capable, thereby which again it can trigger a escalation between Russia and US. Then moving forward, WADA or WADA launches new e-learning course. So what is this WADA? So it stands for World Anti-Doping Agency. So what is this World Anti-Doping Agency? What does doping mean? So doping means taking certain substances which are going to alter the performance of athletes so that they can perform in a much more way than what they are capable of. Simply telling, they are substances which are called as performance enhancers, and this can be done by taking in drugs. The taking in of drugs to enhance their performance in athletic competition or Olympics is called as doping. And here doping is a crime, and if at all an athlete is involved in doping, then he will be banned for certain period of time or for the rest of life if at all his doping is proved. In order to prevent doping from happening before the athlete is going to be cleared for taking to participate in Olympics, he or her, their samples will be taken, that is both the blood sample and urine sample will be taken, and it will be stored for analysis. And if at all an individual takes in certain drugs which are going to increase his performance, thereby which is nothing but cheating in layman terms, what will happen is then in a later time they are going to test for the metabolites, that is breakdown products that will be present in the urine, and also if any metabolites are present in the blood. If they are tested positive, then this person will be disqualified and banned for certain period of time. Even you can know the Wimbledon star Maria Sharapova was also suspended by World Anti-Doping Agency for finding one of the drugs which she mentioned that she did not know she has taken. So there are a lot of instances that athletes claim that they don't know that this drug was banned and they have taken it by eating some source or by some accidental source. So in order to enlighten the athletes and to keep standards so that they can abide to them during the Tokyo Olympics, an online course, the course will offer athletes and coaches an understanding of Tokyo Olympics anti-doping rules, procedures and requirements, including how to check medications and apply for therapeutic use exemption. Means therapeutic use exemption. Therapeutic use exemption means here if the athlete has certain medical condition, then how to deal with that medical condition, that is by seeking exemption, that they have a medical condition and they need to use that drug. That is all about this e-learning course. Then moving forward, Poland to quit treaty on violence against women. So what is the treaty? The treaty, if you see, is the Istanbul Convention. So this is a convention by the European group. So Istanbul Convention, it talks about prevention of violence against women and also against domestic violence. So this is Istanbul Convention. So previously Poland has signed the treaty, and it means that it is in accordance with the Istanbul Convention. But right now it is trying to quit the treaty. So why it is citing that it is going to quit the treaty? It is citing that this treaty violates the parents' rights by requiring schools to teach children about gender, and the Justice Minister of Poland has said so. So if you see, it contains elements of an ideological nature which we consider harmful. So they don't want, especially religion is playing a significant role in the governments. So all the governments are moving towards more right-wing aspects, that is moving towards more conservation attitude in the world in the present scenario. As they are moving, they don't want to adhere or they don't want to move with the flow of changes in the current times, but rather they want to stick on to the old ideologies, and that is why Poland is wanting to quit from this Istanbul Convention. And also Poland is against the LGBT community. Then moving to the next article. So here this article is about a revolution in policy mindset. So this article mainly talks about that as the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19 has affected the world countries, it has especially derailed the process or the route of achieving something that is called as the Sustainable Development Goals. So the target of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals has been declared as 2030 by the United Nations. But already, even before the pandemic of COVID-19 affecting the world countries, especially the Asian countries, the world or these countries were not on the proper track to achieve the SDGs by 2030. But now, further affected by the COVID pandemic, there is no chance that they can reach the SDGs. And if at all the SDGs are not reached, it indicates that majority of the population in the world is going to suffer because of the negative consequences. That is poverty, malnutrition, even the illiteracy and all these aspects. So here what this article talks about is that there should be a change that will be carried on so that it can meet or it can come closer to the SDGs of 2030. So there should be a revolution in the policy mindset of how things can be done. And here first you can see that the virtual high-level political forum on sustainable development recently convened governments and stakeholders to focus on imperative to build back better while keeping an eye on the global goals. So you can't stick on to your older strategies in order to achieve this SDGs of 2030. You have to change your policy in order to press forward. And here especially they talk about that this grounds of optimism, especially the pandemic, has exposed the fragility of the things or the forums or the policies that are already existent. So there is a necessary to change, that is called revolution. And here revolution, you can see that it should be inclusive, accountable governance systems, adaptive institutions with resilience to future shocks, universal social protection and health insurance, and stronger digital infrastructure are the need of the hour. So you can see the fragility of the health infrastructure and even social security, financial security have been exposed because of the weakness that is inherently present in the systems of the world governments. And here, in order to go to the recovery path, so you can see that many governments have given different types of statements in their policies, especially if you see the Asian countries have given about a green recovery. So everything whatever that should be done is in favor of the environment friendly, and also many countries in the Pacific are focused on blue recovery. So you have green recovery and blue recovery. Green recovery means everything environmental friendly, more plants, everything. In blue recovery, that is utilization of the fisheries or the oceans and their resources in order to have a sustainable development. So here you can see seizing the opportunity to promote more sustainable approach to fisheries management, because many of the countries, their economy is going to depend on fisheries that is in the oceans. So that is what the need of the hour, and even the United Nations and Asian Development Bank should mobilize so that the help should be in the direction that the policy changes will benefit, that the future world countries will be resistant to any such unexpected shocks as of the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19. Then moving on to the next article. So the next article talks about the fall of Hong Kong. So you can see the new law system, okay, or new system of law which has been incorporated, or you can see the national security law, which is the new legal system. National security law, which is in place, which has significantly derailed the promises that the China government has kept in favor of the Hong Kong. So if you see the Hong Kong, what is Hong Kong to begin with? So going to the past into the history, during the Treaty of Peking, it was decided that because China lost in war with the British, it has been decided to give Hong Kong for 90-year lease to Britain. So Britain has taken Hong Kong for a period of 99 years under lease. So that 99-year lease has ended in 1997. So that indicates this started in 1898. So in 1898, China, because it has lost in a war under the Treaty of Peking, has handed over this Hong Kong to Britain for a period of 99 years till 1997. And in 1997, once the lease period was over, almost over, even before that, consultations with the Chinese government began by the British government in order to facilitate smooth transition of the governance from British to China. And during that period, it was decided that Hong Kong will be declared as an autonomous region so that the commercial activity or trade will flourish in Hong Kong without affecting by the transition of the governance. So at that period, it was decided for the coming next 50 years. So for the coming next 50 years, that is till 2047, Hong Kong will be declared as an autonomous region, and there the policy whatever that goes is one government, two systems. So one government, two systems. So that is, it means though Hong Kong is going to be called as a part of China, but still administrative aspect of Hong Kong will be independent of that chain from China. That is, the powers have been given to Hong Kong so that it can elect its own legislature, that is executive chief or chief executive, who is going to be the administrative ruler of Hong Kong. But what happened is, though in the initial phases only 2,000 people were allowed to vote so that they can elect their executive, chief executive, though China has meddled a lot, people were in a positive note that in the coming years things will change and their life is going to be better for the next 50 years. But slowly it turned out that China's force towards this attitude has been in a negative way. And with the recent law that the Hong Kong government, by the pressure of China, wanted to implement in Hong Kong, that is the extradition policy, by which people from the mainland of Hong Kong can be extradited to China if at all they are involved in any crimes, and these crimes may not be proved, but they will be tried in China. So it is 100% conviction rate can be found in the Chinese courts. So in order to prevent people agitated, and seeing that people are agitating against China, Chinese government wanted to crush with an iron foot, and for that it has passed a new law that is called as National Security Law, by which it is going to have a negative attribute on all the people who start protesting or showing formal protest, which should not actually require any legal intervention. By passing this national security law, which is nothing but like an anti-sedition law. So sedition is something that you try to disrupt the government by carrying out any speeches, your notes, statements, and to instigate people against the government can be treated as sedition. But here, simple dissatisfaction by the people against the government is also being treated as sedition, and for preventing or to have a clampdown effectively on this population, the law that has been released is National Security Law. So I have to wait and see how the China crackdown is happening and how Hong Kong is going to recuperate on this aspect. And only 25 years have passed out of all this, and within this even less span than 25 years itself, you can see such huge clampdown on Hong Kong, whereby which China has failed to keep up its promises towards the people of Hong Kong, which is having dire consequences. This is all about this topic. Then moving forward, a governor's test. So this article talks about that governors should not act at the behest of the party ruling at the center. This is in accordance with the actual activity of political unrest or crisis that is going on in Rajasthan, and the Rajasthan governor Kalraj Mishra, who is favoring the central government, that is BJP. So if you talk about the governor, so governor is the representative of the state, and he is appointed by the president, and governor should ideally, as per the Sarkaria Commission or the Pucci Commission, what it talks about is that the governor should not have any affiliations or active participation in politics with any party, and he should be non-partisan, that he should not be partial to any of the governments. And especially here, because always the tussle between the center and the state happens between the governor and respective governments, state governments. As governor is appointed by the central government, there are chances that, as you can see in the case of Kalraj Mishra, who is a member of BJP, an active member of BJP, and after his participation in the political activity, later he has been given the role as governor in Rajasthan, and he is appointed by the central government. So once he is appointed by central government and he is also a member of BJP, that is a staunch member of RSS, so naturally he is going to move in favor of whatever the center asks. So though it cannot be proved, or at the same time it cannot be ignored also, that his effective activity in creating the problem by not conducting a floor test, by not having an assembly session as wanted or as asked by the Ashok Gehlot, that is the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, during the political crisis that is happening, by the movement of or by the act of not following guidelines by the Sachin Pilot group. And here the governor, as per the recommendations given by Sarkaria Commissions and MM Pucci Commission, what it says is, in the appointment of the governor, the active consultations with the Chief Minister of the respective state should be done. So when the state, so more favor to the Chief Minister of the state should be given in order to select and appoint the governor, so that they both can work for the upliftment of the state. Rather, the center should not appoint a governor who is going to work in favor of the center, thereby which destabilizing the respective state government, which may lead to multiple political crises, as you can see even in the SR Bommai case. So this is all about the topic. Then moving forward, next article, a motorcycle and the art of court management. So what is this motorcycle? Especially you can see the present Chief Justice of India, S.A. Bobde, has posed with a motorcycle without a face mask, during this session of the Supreme Court not being in place. So that immediately was tweeted, that picture was immediately tweeted by Prashant Bhushan, who is an advocate of the Supreme Court and a Norton activist. So he has cited that this clearly shows that CJI is not interested and he is more involved in his own luxuries. So immediately what has been done is, rather than ignoring the comment made by Prashant Bhushan, immediately the Supreme Court convened a 3-member bench and it has started the contempt proceedings against Prashant Bhushan, and a notice was served both to Prashant Bhushan and also Twitter India for their activity. So here you have to understand what is contempt. Even the second article, if you see this article, the chilling effect of criminal contempt, also talks about the same aspect, and even the next article, scandalizing as contempt, also talks about the same aspect. So you have to understand what is this contempt. So contempt is nothing but contempt of court as declared through an act in 1971, Contempt of Court Act of 1971. It talks about what is meant by contempt and what are the different types of contempt. So any judgment that is given by the court, if it is not followed or if it is not adhered, it will constitute contempt. And even if an individual is trying to defame the Supreme Court or the court itself, demeaning the court, then that is also treated as contempt. So how can you categorize? So contempt is 2 types. One is the civil contempt, and the second thing is criminal contempt. So civil contempt is the contempt if at all a court's judgment is not followed. If someone is not obliging with the orders given by the court, it will be treated as civil contempt. So then what is criminal contempt? So if at all someone is trying to demean the court or lower the status of the court through his statements, through his publications, then it will be treated as criminal contempt. Now what that has been started against Prashant Bhushan is criminal contempt. So he has also in the past made several statements citing that all the 16 CJIs of the past have been inducted in corruption. So if you see this aspect of contempt against the noted activist, so in the developed countries, that is including Britain, from whom we have taken the legislature, from whom we have taken the parliamentary system, it has clearly stricken down the contempt proceedings. So citing that in one of the incidents where the House of Lords individuals were depicted in an upside down image and said, one of the newspaper has pointed out as "you old fools." So the court has immediately convened and they have simply showed that they have broad shoulders and they can shrug off or totally ignore the statement made by the newspaper, citing that though yes we are old, but it may be in the perception of several individuals that we may be fools or wise, but that is not going to implicate us. So that is how broad the thinking of the courts of several other countries are. But in the present ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, there are a lot of cases that are pending, a lot of important constitutional judgments, that is constitutional bench issues are pending, so that the verdict should be given. That is like women entry into temple, that, and even there are the more pressing issues like the Citizenship Amendment Act, which have to be delivered the judgment in due time. But despite of all this, the court is much more pressing that it want to carry the contempt of proceedings against Mr. Prashant Bhushan. So this is a high time that the court should immediately move away from this step, and even in India we should follow the international standards by moving away, by using the contempt of court as a weapon in order to safeguard, or a blazing glory of the judges should be safeguarded by using the contempt. Rather, contempt should not be used to safeguard the judges from criticism, but rather it should be used in order to see that if the judgments of the court are not upheld, so that the people should understand that the court is all powerful. So that should be the way that all this should be dealt with. So here it is a scandal, especially showing that contempt is going to affect. So this sums up all the aspects of the topics of today's Hindu newspaper. I hope you have understood. If you have any doubts, you can post in the comment section. Thank you. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can get daily updates.